The first thing I remember is the way the candles looked, 8 tiny, furious suns sinking into yellow wax, each flame a question aimed at me. I sat across from Maya with a plastic crown tilted on her head and pretended the house was full. I pretended the door had just slammed behind guests and the hallway echoed with footsteps. I pretended because she already asked, with frosting on her lip and shame in her small voice. No one came, and the air in the room turned sharp enough to cut. I didn't let the cut show. I bought sparklers, I put on our favorite song, and we spun around the coffee table like fools, laughing until the light swam. I made it a party for 2 because I would not let 8 candles teach my daughter what being forgotten felt like. But when she fell asleep with the glitter still in her hair, I sat on the couch and my phone glowed like an accusation. There it was, a thread of messages, screenshots, little digital footprints that read like a betrayal. Party cancelled. Sorry for the confusion. Sent from an account pretending to be me. The style, the clipped sentences, the way the emoji never quite stitched itself into a smile, smelled of someone who knew how to fake sincerity. Whoever did it wanted the room to be empty. Whoever did it wanted my daughter to feel small. My sister's name floated up like smoke. Lila? The same woman who used to braid my hair and then, when the mirror gleamed differently, learned how to be prettier than the hurt she caused. I watched the messages again and this time I saw fingerprints, phrasing, an IP trace that leaned left toward Lila's phone, a timestamp that placed her near my parents' house. I felt the world reorganize itself in that instant, everything I assumed about family as a safety net bending into something fragile and sharp. You learn 1,000 little tolerances living with favors owed and grudges unpaid, you lower your voice at dinner, you let certain things slide, you become an expert at shrinking. But this wasn't a slight against me. This was aimed at Maya, at her 8 small lungs and the way she wanted the world to answer with a yes. That's when the shrinking stopped. I didn't storm the house. I didn't scream. I collected evidence like someone collecting shells on a shore, carefully, methodically, because rage without proof is theater and I wanted the stage to be a courtroom. Screenshots, metadata, the sort of cold digital breadcrumbs that don't lie when a person's face might. I saved the messages, pulled the IP traces, printed the screenshots until the printer whirred like a tiny, righteous machine. Lila lived for Polish. Her life was a display case, picture-perfect brunches, the kind of Instagram captions that read like perfume ads. She'd always known how to make people forget the things that made her small, the flares of jealousy, the petty cruelties, because a pretty life is persuasive. So I planned a knock that would crack the glass. The next morning I wrote a message to every parent in Maya's class. Short. Polite. Honest. Yesterday's party was not cancelled. Someone impersonated me. My daughter waited for friends who never arrived. I've attached evidence. I hit send and watched the little group explode. Texts came back like thunder. Questions. Outrage. Sympathy. The parents who used to smile politely at Lila's jokes now read screenshots that made her look callous, petty, small. By noon the group chat had rewritten the story of our family. By mid-afternoon Lila's phone lit up with messages that couldn't be cleaned with a camera filter. She tried the old things, charm, plausible deniability, a practiced laugh, but the evidence I'd sent was a bright, unforgiving truth. People called her workplace. People demanded answers. By the time evening arrived, her world was a ring of stares and glassy, mistrustful faces. That's when I walked into my parents' living room without knocking. They were there, like a photograph, Ruth smoothing the napkin at her knee, Daniel with his paper cup, comfortable in the luxury of not knowing. Lila paced like a caged thing, already practicing disbelief. What did you do? She snapped before I reached the coffee table. I set the bundle of printouts down, the messages, the IP traces, the timeline all laid out like evidence against a forgery. My father flipped the first page and his color left his face like water. My mother's hand went limp around her cup. You made me look like a monster, Lila shrieked, but she was angry the way people are when the play they wrote is revealed mid-act. I didn't, she started, then stopped when the room smelled of paper and truth. I didn't say much. I watched them read. I watched the place where their favorites list used to be shift. Parents called Lila's boss. Complaints arrived in her inbox. By morning, she was suspended pending review. By noon, she was explaining herself to strangers who had once clinked glasses with her on good days. They called me a dozen times after that. Begging, pleading, trying to bribe a return to silence. Make it stop, my mother said. Say it's a mistake. I listened until their voices frayed, until the edges of the apology looked like paper. And then I said 3 sentences, slow and precise so it would echo in their memory as long as mine would. You left my daughter alone in an empty room with 8 candles. You chose silence over coming through. I remember that. I will remember that. Then I put the phone down and walked away. I threw another party the following week. This time I invited every kid, every parent who had been hurt by the small soft cruelty of an empty chair. Maya wore the crown again. The house was loud in the way a heart should be when it's alive, balloons, crumbs, the octave of children laughing. People stayed late to help pick up, to say things in private, how awful it had been, how childish, how dangerous. Mothers shook their heads and promised their kids would never learn from Lila's example, but I need to be honest, because confessions are part of this. I do not walk around believing I was a saint in this. I did something other than expose. I used the tools I had. I used the very thing that had been used against us, the phone, the screenshots, and made them count for something kinder. There is a line between stirring the pot and setting a fire. I crossed it, and I know that now in the way you know a scar you didn't earn without pain. A week after the party, I stood alone at Maya's window and watched my sister pass by on the sidewalk, head down. The neighborhood whispers had found a rhythm, and every glance at Lila carried a memory she couldn't smooth over. That used to feel like victory. Now, sometimes, it tastes like something else, a bruise you thought was justice that leaves you wondering if you became the thing you were fighting. So why tell you this? Why lay it out like a confession on a table? Because the moment they target your child, something fundamental unglues. Protecting her felt less like revenge and more like reclamation. I wanted the world to remember what was done to her, to make the omission public so omission would no longer be a private shame. I wanted Maya to look back at those 8 candles and know she was wanted, not that the room had simply been empty by accident. If you think I'm proud of everything I did, you're wrong. If you think I'd do it differently now, sometimes I would, and sometimes I wouldn't. I would, in a heartbeat, take the sting to keep her from being small. That's the thing about parenting. You learn where your moral compass bends when someone aims a knife at your child. Listen to me, if you've ever sat across from a little person and pretended the world was kinder than it is, you know the ache in that air. Tell me what you would have done. Would you have stood up like I did, printed the messages, made the proof public? Or would you have swallowed the hurt and taught your child to be forgiving in a world that sometimes rewards cruelty? If this made you feel anything, anger, relief, discomfort, leave a comment. Tell me your story. Hit like if you believe kids should never have to blow out candles alone. Share if you know someone who needs to hear they're not forgotten. We hold the stories that shape the people we love. Don't let anyone write one for your child but you.